I just want to do a quick little demonstration video on proper size lead to use for stained glass edging and the importance of shimming and allowing space around the window. Here I'm showing half-inch lead, the H channel, and the glass. This would be the edge, outer edge. Typically it's 3/16, 3 to 5 millimeter, probably 3 to 4 millimeter, but 3/16 to 7/32 thereabout. That's what allows you to get that glass to fit in there. And glass, I'm just saying about 3 millimeters. You notice it's sitting close to the back. If you're looking at it from this side, that's your front of your window looking downward. This would be the back, and naturally it would lay more flush to the back, allowing more stained glass cement into this area of the window. Alright, and again we're looking at it on a flat view from the edge, cutout. And looking at it straight in, you have the half-inch lead going around the window. This can be up against a piece of quarter-inch tempered glass, what have you, plate glass. If it's in a door, it has to be tempered. A regular window with a wood frame. You put the stained glass. When you measure for your stained glass, always go from the full open size. Say this is 36. You want to go 29. I'm sorry, 29. I was thinking 30. So it's all right. Let's go 30. This is 30 inches from point to point. You want to go 29 3/4, which would be your stained glass size. Alright, say it's 12. This would be 11 3/4. That's the size of your stained glass. So 29 3/4 by 11 3/4. What that does, it allows 1/8 of an inch spacing around your window. It's very important for two reasons. The most important is to allow for expansion of the window if it should. It also allows for ventilation of the window, which you need. And also when you do your final quarter, like a shoe molding or whatever type of molding it is, typically it's about a half-inch in the height here. When you put the molding down, you're going to see a little bit of lead edging on it. If you use a 3/8 lead, it's too short. So you got to go at half-inch. It gives you a little, lead edging around the window. It looks nicer, and it also helps with the ventilation when properly. When you take your lead, when you run a knife along the edge, you bend down the outer leaves of the window. Right? You pinch them together. You don't leave them out, like this. You want to take a putty knife and press downward and just give it a nice beveled edge. That's important for when you want to shim the window. I'm showing using a 3/16 or quarter-inch lead. You lay that down in the frame in areas of the window that will support that shim. Like a line is good, the middle. Line here is good. It's going to support that weight. And you could add more, but honestly, 3 in a 30-inch window is fine. It'll allow the air to come up and around the back, and then again out the top. You don't want it too tight on the top. You don't want it to sit flush on the bottom. You want it to be bumped up a little bit. This shows the shim, the lead. I mean, this actually would be touching the lead, once you push the window down into the shim. It'll kind of nudge itself right in the middle of that 3/16 or 1/4 inch H round. This would be a rounded, or you could use a wood shim. If you have a 1/4 by 1/4, a 1/2 inch by actually you don't want much. You want the spacing is 1/8 of an inch, so it would be like a the thickness of, say, a paint stirrer. All right, you could even use cut up a paint stirrer and put a couple of them thin shims on the bottom. I would prefer to use lead, because if you did get any moisture, you don't want it to collect moisture and create a mold issue. So lead's the best. I use typically a 3/16 or 1/4 inch round H lead. And once the shims are in, the stained glass is on top, you can run a couple of safety brads, put them on the lead lines, to get your hammer, tap a brad right into that wood frame. Not all the way, just so the nail catches the top of the window, keeps it from falling out on you. Alright. Another good way to hold it in temporarily, you get a hot glue gun and you hit a little hot glue right up here. Make sure your window's centered, an even space here and here. Put a little hot glue right up in the corner here. Give it probably 3 or 4 seconds. It'll settle quick. And again here, count to 10, make sure it's not soft, and that hot glue will hold your window in place. You can put a little dab here if you want to, but honestly, that's not necessary. 2 on the side. Now this area that it's showing it's white around the perimeter of the stained glass, that would be actually the color of the frame. So if you had a 1/2 inch rabbet here on the all the way around, this white area would be the color of the frame. So when you do glue your hot glue in, you're actually hitting the inside of the rabbet and the lead, and it'll hold it in place. Right? And starting with the sides, you cut, if you don't have trim already, you might have removed trim. You put your side leg trim up. That's what they call it, leg trim. Give it if you're doing a square stock, you just cut it a straight butt cut at top and bottom, and then you go ahead and with the bottom piece, you put your bottom piece in, and or the top. If it's a mitered corner, the longer piece is best to go last, because you can bend it a little bit to get that miter to really fit tight, snug in the corner. That's why you put the legs in first, and you have a little more leeway with the longer piece. And then using a pneumatic gun, you shoot the trim in, and then the same with the bottom. Basically, this video is to show you importance of using 1/2 inch lead. Don't use 3/8. It's too short. It doesn't give you that edging. So it looks nice to have a little edging to your window. Also, you want to be able to bevel the bottom to allow you to shim correctly. Because when you put the trim on over the top now, the trim will also bump gently outward from wherever you soldered your lead joints here. Okay? That's why you want it to be a little hard, thicker as well. So when you put this trim against the edge of the stained glass, when you solder these pieces of lead in, you're going to have solder bumping up a little bit. That's actually a good thing, because the trim will push against that solder joint, allowing that slight space right in here for the ventilation. It'll allow the air come over, up, and around through here in these areas here where there's no shims. That's the best way to ventilate a window, stained glass window, especially going against an existing window. So again, it's very important. Use the 1/2 inch H flat. Right? It's very important. I mean, there's no, don't use zinc that's got a U channel. I mean, you could, but you put the zinc in, you got to shim it up as well. Don't lay your zinc all the way down. The only problem with zinc is it's not going to give you that bumping advantage you have with all of the solder joints that extend into that 1/2 inch lead. In other words, when you solder a piece of lead to this one, the actual solder joint from the solder will bump up like that, and that'll give you that spacing between the trim and the window. That's going to cause, make it so it'll vent. So you don't put the shims all the way to the side. You want the air to flow up the side too, and to the back. When the window heats up, the space in between, it'll pull up and vent out the top. And again, the trim on the top will be bumped out, allowing air to flow from the back of the window out the top. You don't need shims on the top, but that's going to allow that. Alright, so it's proper ventilation. It's very important. It will eliminate any condensation issues, and as well, the 1/2 inch lead will give you that extra bump you need against the trim for proper ventilation. Don't use the 3/8 lead, it's too thin. If say the window's a little tight, so I can't shim it that much. If that ever was the case, excuse me, with the window 1/2 inch lead, you can also, let me zoom in here a little bit. Zoom in. Say this was sitting flush right to the bottom. You say, oh, I made it too big. You made a mistake. In this lead, the 1/2 inch lead, you could actually cut out, with a razor knife, or maybe do it by the lead line. Cut out like a half moon where the shims would be. So with that half moon, what that's going to do, it's going to open up a space under the window to allow that ventilation to come through. If you made a mistake, if you made it too big, a properly fitting window will have that 1/4 inch in the height and the width, so it'll be 1/8 of an inch all the way around. But, if you do make it too tight, you find yourself really squeezing it in, make sure you remove some of that lead. You won't see it because this trim will cover it, right? But you'll have a space. The air will go around, get up behind the window. Actually, the air doesn't go this way. It's being drawn from the heat in between the window, allowing air to escape the top. And as well as the half round here, you need them at the top. You're better off having a full open top, but if you have to vent it, if it's too tight, make sure you give that half round cuts. You know, three. You know, three of them. You have to go crazy. If it's in the full sun, yeah, you know what? You actually should rebuild the window. You know, take off what you have to take off. But if you want to save the day, just cut a couple of half moons, and you don't have to go all the way to the core. Close enough. From the bottom here. You don't have to take off the whole leg. Just enough to allow any air movement. Okay. And 3/8 is too. It's not wide enough. It's too narrow. For issues if say this, it's not perfectly square, or there's a little bow in the header, and you got to trim your leads. It happens. So you're always better off with a half-inch lead. If you hold the window carefully, you could actually take a sharp razor knife, utility knife, and cut off each side of the lead, the actual the leaf. You can actually bring it right down to this core. I wouldn't do it. Cut this off, cut that off, and you cut half at a time. You score here, and just lob it off. If you had to, like say there's a bad bow, you say, oh, where did that bow come from? I got to take off that lead. With 3/8, you're really cutting it close. You're giving yourself no chance to make any of those kind of adjustments. As well, and important as well, the half-inch lead, giving you that space, will also allow for expansion if you need it. You say it was really tight. The half-inch it's a little more forgiving. All right. So whenever, a 30-inch window, 36, 48, 50, 90 feet, 9 feet, half-inch lead. In larger windows, say 8-foot tall windows, 8x5, you could use a 3/4 off-heart. So actually, one side of the window is this side is half-inch, and then this leg would be 3/4. Half-inch. I mean, this is quarter is half. So you'd have like half-inch on this side and 1/4 inch here. So that would be 3/4 off-heart, they call it. That's for large windows with thick framing, say aluminum framing with snap-out molding, snap-in moldings, commercial style windows. Companies like Sussman in New York, they make the triple glazed, double glazed framing specifically for stained glass. They've been around for a very long time. The moldings just snap in. Aluminum, snap them down. So, but you need the off-heart lead just for a little bit more assurance of the fit, and as well, if you had heavy rabbets on a steel framing and use the galvanized spring clips, that they go up and they go and they push the window in, so you can use a glazing compound on the exterior. If you don't have a high enough lead, you're going to overlap the glass area, which you really don't want to do. The 3/4 off-heart would work really well for that, especially in the old brick or masonry framings, with the fancy Gothic tops. It allows you to put that in and glaze it without worrying about getting light on the glazing compound, which would be exterior metal grade compound. These shims are important. You got a shim. This is like a half by 3/8, 5/8 by half. Yeah, you see this stuff like shoe molding. You don't have to use this. You can use a half by 3/4, flat, as long as it fits in this rabbet, coming out. or whatever was up there. They allowed you to 1/4 inch. If it's right to the end, you might have to trim it. You have to get a narrower, lower profile. Instead of going 5/8, you go 1/2 inch, quarter round, or half by half. That would be your new stops. If you use what was in there and it ran flush to the edge, you're gonna have issues. It's not gonna look right. So you better off changing it out. All right. I just wanted to go over the importance of using the 1/2 inch flat H exterior lead for your stained glass. And as always, you will get the reasonings behind it. I'm not just going to say, do it this way. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you why, explain the differences. In this case, the shimming, the aesthetics. You want to see a little edging of lead around after it's all installed. You don't want to just see wood to glass. And have a little pocket of dust, a dust pocket. You don't want that. You want to see a little edge of the lead. It'll look nice too. And then with the hot glue trick, it's not a trick. It actually works really well. Put the hot glue up here, or if you're not comfortable with the hot glue, you run a brad. If you're really uncomfortable, you run a couple brads. Just in the top. But the hot glue works really well. I hope this helps, and there's more to, other issues with stained glass. For larger windows, if it's going to be a single window, I did one that was 5 feet wide by 8 feet tall. It was one opening, and in that case, I made the windows 5 feet wide by 4 feet tall, with a break in the middle. And what I actually used was aluminum, which was 1 inch this way, 1 inch thick, and then 1/4 inch this way. So when you put the stained glass in, you stand this H up now, and then this area here slips on top of the window that's installed on the bottom. And then by running your trim, you cut this H, it's like a divider. It's actually a window divider. You cut the front of the leg off. So when you put your trim in, you still have the back against the back. Or if you cut it flush, you could still put the trim up and over it. It'll hold this H aluminum in. There may be those kind of options. You could go full width of the opening. If you have the trim, you can also notch out the trim to go over that area. You take a wood file and just kind of pull it out a little bit. If it's a wood window, it's very similar to old saddle bar installations, where the saddle bar, you wouldn't have saddle bars running here, you'd have them here. The frame itself, a hole was drilled on both ends of the bar, so you had a bar going across. The bar would be inserted in the frame. Actually, you drill higher here, so you can lift the bar in and drop it down. And then along the way of the stained glass, there would be wire soldered to joints in the window. So you'd have a bar here, you'd have a wire here, 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 and then once the window is installed against the saddle bar from the outside, because the bars would be on the inside, you now take your wire, you twist it up around, spin it over the saddle bar, nip off the end, and solder the wire together, leaving a nice ball end on it. And that's how saddle bars are done. You see a lot of old church windows with the saddle bars running across. They'll run every 2-3 feet, and the reason why they use them to keep the stained glass from blowing out in a severe storm. The saddle bars are actually part of the frame now. You know, the modern day rebar, you know, with the notched edging, that is not as strong. It may rip through a wood frame, but nowadays a lot of the churches go with aluminum frames, a lot more sturdier. But in the old days, wood frames, you know, saddle bar would go 2 inches into the frame, you know, and then tight, buttoned up, tight. And that's how windows were installed without any exterior glazing. Yes, stained glass was single glaze. You know, rain, snow, everything hit it. You know, modern protection glazing, it is more of a modern thing. Yeah, and that's a modern 50, 80 years modern. But it's still used. It was used then as well. And then windows are made in sashes with heavy sashes around the window, and the actual sashes themselves were vented. I have these aluminum 1-inch round vents with louvers on them, you know, coming down. You drill a 1-inch hole. You put if you're going to put exterior glazing on it, you drill the 1-inch hole, and you face the louvers downward on the bottom of the window, and then the 1-inch hole on the top. And depending on how wide the sash is, you might go with 3 or 4, and then you have the louvers facing upward, you know, like that, so you don't see daylight coming through. So the actual sash, you'd be venting the sash. You know, the stained glass would just stay right in the sash, but you'd vent the sash and then put the exterior glazing up. There are times you couldn't vent the sash. You'd have to vent the exterior glaze, which is typically Lexan in that case, where you can drill and put shims, you know, bump out shims, which is, you know, not good for bugs. That's an option. And the other option is to get louvers as well in the Lexan. Actually drill a hole in the Lexan and do the same thing with the venting. And the only problem is the Lexan would have to have all the vents facing down because of the weather. Any little bit of moisture that got in there would come out the bottom, because any kind of Lexan, again, you don't want to completely seal the bottom. You want that sill plate to allow any moisture that's in there to come out. So there will be, and you know, it's like a little weeping system you need to install, whether it's a series of 1/4-inch holes along the bottom, or, you know, a notch. There should be something. It's something, you know, if you're going to do exterior glazing without venting the stained glass on the inside, it's always better to vent the stained glass on the inside. Alright, that's a whole other subject. I mean, we're talking about installation, lead caming and all that. I guess I'd bring it up. Just working at somebody is making a stained glass window for a door a client is looking for. This looks like it could be this is an eyebrow window. It's probably a sandwiched, you know, vinyl frame for this. And you know, I'll make a video on how to install that using H-channel lead or zinc. It actually works really well for these type of frames. But I just, she said, oh, I need a 35 window to match that for a transom. And, you know, here's the stuff. That's how I help. You know, I always say in my videos, you know, I pay it back. I didn't have my hand out. I say, here you go. She loved it. Right? And hopefully she'll make it and be successful with it. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that. I'm always talking about, you know, helping others and paying back. It's not about me. And all my experience and discussions on what I'm when I do discuss what I'm talking about, I go into extreme depth in the discussion. I'm not going to leave you hanging. That's not me. And again, below, any questions? This is not something that everybody has dealt with. This is like professional stained glass stuff. It's I mean, you can do it, but I just want to tell you about the importance of the spacing when you measure, shimming, trim, allowing airflow, all of the above. And I explain it in full detail. Even the bottom leaf of the half-inch lead and using lead as a shim. And why you use lead as a shim. If you're going to use any material, I mean, stay away from wood, but if you have to, maybe a piece of plastic or something, it really just cuts down on any issues. I mean, you could probably use wood, but you're better off with lead. You have the lead, all windows made out of lead. Grab a couple of scrap pieces, bring it along, and stick it in there, and it works good. It kind of holds it in place. All right. With that, I'm going to close this video out. And as always, please give me a thumbs up, a subscribe, or, my most important thing, leave a comment below. I love the comments. Take care and have a nice day.